Well, good evening, everyone. Hope you're doing well tonight. As always, let me know where you're coming from the chat and the rest. Log in, let me know. I love catching up with everybody wherever you're from. I love seeing, I get to go back at times and see where everybody's coming from Nigeria and China, from all over the United States, all different places. Thank you so much for being here almost every week, tuning in. If you're watching after the fact, as always, same thing, let me know. And I'm just so grateful for your continued presence through this series. Tonight, we're continuing on. It's a shorter little article and the rest, but man, it's a fantastic one. Some great arguments. And so we're going to read through the chapter fairly quickly on this aspect, look at some basic context, and then five basic things that I want us to kind of catch at the end when it comes to this chapter. So without further ado, let's dive right into the background of this one called The Laws of Nature. So the background is this. It's likely originating from his wartime radio talks or Oxford lectures. That's the reality. There is no set one where this has been, as we've had in previous weeks, where it was directly noted here or it was published here and the rest. Because it's arguing a lot of the things that he argues in a lot of different places, from the abolition of man to mere Christianity. It argues about universal moral intuitions, mostly shared across cultures. This is one of his major arguments in Mere Christianity. And his argument is that it points to a transcendent moral law suggesting a divine source, that because we have this moral law, that there must be a divine source for it. As noted, this is included in the 1970 posthumous collection, God in the Dock, as we're working through right now. And this piece counters subjective ethics, offering a reasoned case for morality as evidence of purposeful, intelligent design, both accessible to both religious and secular readers. So, without further ado, let's actually read it. It's a fantastic little article. We'll read it together. "Poor woman," said my friend. "One hardly knows what to say when they talk like that. She thinks her son survived Arnhem because she prayed for him. It would be heartless to explain to her that he really survived because he was standing a little to the left or a little to the right of some bullet. That bullet was following a course laid down by the laws of nature. It couldn't have hit him. He just happened to be standing off its line. And so all day long, as regards every bullet and every splinter of shell, his survival was simply due to the laws of nature." At that moment, my first pupil came in and the conversation was cut short. But later in the day, I had to walk across the park, a committee meeting, and this gave me time to think the matter over. It was quite clear that once a bullet had been fired from point A in direction of B, the wind being C, and so forth, it would pursue a certain path. But might our young friend have been standing somewhere else? And might the German have fired at a different moment or in a different direction? If men have free will, it would appear that they might. On that view, we get a rather more complicated picture of the Battle of Arnhem. The total course of events would be a kind of amalgam derived from two sources. On the one hand, from acts of human will, which might presumably have been otherwise, and on the other, from the laws of physical nature. And this would seem to provide all that is necessary for the mother's belief that her prayers had some place among the causes of her son's preservation. God might continually influence the wills of all the combatants so as to allow death, wounds, and survival in the way he thought best, while leaving the behavior of the projectile to follow its normal course. Just a note here, because this is a fascinating argument, and this is one that's definitely coming out of both either World War I and World War II, noting this mother and that she believed that her son was saved because of her prayer life, of her prayers for him in that way. He's making, in one way, the original argument that's being set forth, in essence, is that the laws of nature, if there is no God, if everything is just the laws of nature, then there is nothing that we are doing currently that is not already predisposed and bound specifically by the laws of nature. We have no free will. We are merely the atoms crashing in our brains and our heads and the rest that are allowing us and forcing us to do specific things in specific ways in specific orders. This is, by the way, the argument that some people have taken to a point where I read an article probably about 20 years ago that was directly arguing that there is no such thing as free will. Thus, every prison should be open and freed because people cannot change what they have done. There is no such thing as right or wrong. It is all subjective from that standpoint. And instead of prisons, we should have more hospitals. But even the concept of a hospital is you're healing something that has already been set forth. It's already going to happen in that way no matter what. So that's the argument here. And Lewis is going to argue the opposite, in essence, on this. But I was still not quite clear about the physical side of this picture. I had been thinking, vaguely enough, that the bullet's flight was caused by the laws of nature. But is this really so? Granted that the bullet is set in motion, and granted the wind and the Earth's gravitation and all the other relevant factors, then it is a law of nature that the bullet must take the course it did. But then the pressing of the trigger, the side wind, and even the Earth are not exactly laws. They are facts or events. They are not laws, but things that obey laws. Obviously, to consider the pressing of the trigger would only lead us back to the free will side of the picture. We must therefore choose a simpler example. The law of physics, I understand, decree that when one billiard ball sets another billiard ball in motion, the momentum lost by A exactly equals the momentum gained by B. This is a law. That is, this is the pattern to which the movement of the two billiard balls must conform. Provided, of course, that something sets ball A in motion. And here comes the snag. The law won't set it in motion. It is usually a man with a cue who does that. But a man with a cue would send us back to free will. So let us assume that it was lying on a table in a liner and that what set it in motion was a lurch of the ship. In that case, it was not the law which produced the movement, it was a wave. And that wave, though it certainly moved according to the laws of physics, was not moved by them. It was shoved by other waves and by winds and so forth. And however far you trace the story back, you would never find laws of nature causing anything. The dazzlingly obvious conclusion now arose in my mind. In the whole history of the universe, the laws of nature have never produced a single event. They are the pattern to which every event must conform, provided only that it can be induced to happen. But how do you get it to do that? How do you get a move on? The laws of nature can give you no help there. All events obey them, just as all operations with money obey the laws of arithmetic. Add 6 pennies to 6, and the result will certainly be a shilling. But arithmetic by itself won't put any farthing into your pocket. Up until now, I have had a vague idea that the laws of nature could make things happen. I now saw that this was exactly like thinking that you could increase your income by doing sums about it. The laws are the pattern to which events conform. The source of events must be sought elsewhere. This goes back to this idea. If you have a law, you have to have a law giver. The source of events must be sought elsewhere. This may be put in the form that the laws of nature explain everything except the source of events. But this is rather a formidable exception. The laws, in one sense, cover the whole of reality, except that continuous cataract of real events which make up the actual universe. They explain everything except what we should ordinarily call everything. The only thing they omit is the whole universe. I have to say, I love that line. The only thing they omit is the whole universe. I do not mean that a knowledge of these laws is useless. Provided we can take over the actual universe as a going concern, such knowledge is useful and indeed indispensable for manipulating it. Just as, if only you have some money, arithmetic is indispensable for managing it. But the events themselves, the money itself, it is quite another affair. So imagine how this could be useful. Knowing the laws of gravity and the rest help us with flight and shipping and all sorts of different things. Knowing the laws is very helpful, but it doesn't change the fact that you have to have a cause itself. Where then do actual events come from? In one sense, the answer is easy. Every event comes from a previous event. But what happens if you trace this process backwards? To ask this is not exactly the same as to ask where things come from, how there came to be space and time and matter at all. Our present problem is not about things, but about events. Not, for example, about particles of matter, but about the particle colliding with that. The mind can perhaps acquiesce to the idea as the properties of the universal drama somehow just happen to be there. But whence comes the play, the story? Either the stream of events had a beginning, or it had not. If it had, then we are faced with something like creation. If it had not, a supposition, by the way, which some physicists find difficult, then we are faced with the everlasting impulse which, by its very nature, is opaque to scientific thought. Science, when it becomes perfect, will have explained the connection between each link in the chain and the link before it. But the actual existence of the chain will remain wholly unaccountable. We learn more and more about the pattern. We learn nothing about that which feeds real events into the pattern. If it is not God, we must at the very least call it destiny, the immaterial, ultimate, one-way pressure which keeps the universe on the move. The smallest event, then, if we face the fact that it occurs, instead of concentrating on the pattern to which, if it can be persuaded to occur, it must fit, leads us back to a mystery which lies outside natural science. It is certainly a possible supposition that behind this mystery, some mighty will in life is at work. If so, any contrast between his acts and the laws of nature is out of the question. It is his act alone that gives the laws any events to apply to. The laws are an empty frame. It is he who fills that frame, not now and then on specially providential occasions, but at every moment. And he, from his vantage point above time, can, if he pleases, take all prayers into account in ordaining the vast complex event which is the history of the universe. For what we call future prayers have always been present to him. In Hamlet, a branch breaks and Ophelia is drowned. Did she die because the branch broke or because Shakespeare wanted her to die at that point in the play? Either, both, whichever you please. The alternative suggested by the question is not a real alternative at all, once you have grasped that Shakespeare is making the whole play. This entire argument that he makes, it's a brilliant concept in and of itself, and it's very philosophical, and it's got a kind of a deep notion to it. But I want to look at 5 things in particular. So 5 things that I think will help us as an overall premise and argument that he's making here. God is the source of all events. The laws of nature are not. So a quote that kind of brings this out from this is, the dazzlingly obvious conclusion now arose in my mind. In the whole history of the universe, the laws of nature have never produced a single event. They are the pattern to which every event must conform, provided only that it can be induced to happen. So here's the translation. Christians can find reassurance that the universe is not a mechanical system driven solely by impersonal laws. Instead, God actively initiates and sustains every event, giving meaning and purpose to what might otherwise seem random or determined. This is how God can work in the mess, and how God works in spite of our failings and in spite of us messing up and in spite of our sins. This is how God continues to work through those moments. The second one is God integrates free will and natural law in his providence. The total course of events, and this is the quote from the article, the total course of events would be a kind of amalgam derived from 2 sources. On the one hand, from acts of human will, which might presumably have been otherwise, and on the other, from the laws of physical nature. So the translation of this is this. This affirms the Christian belief that human free will is real and significant, yet operates within God's sovereign plan. God harmonizes human choices with natural laws, ensuring his purposes are fulfilled while respecting human agency, while respecting our free will to choose right and wrong, to choose him and to not. The third one is prayers are effective because God transcends time. The quote here is, and he, from his vantage point above time, can, if he pleases, take all prayers into account in ordaining that vast complex event, which is the history of the universe. Christians can trust that their prayers matter, as God, being outside of time, incorporates them into his eternal plan. This encourages persistent prayer, knowing that God considers every petition in shaping history. Now, I'll be honest with you, this is a hard one for me to grasp at times, to think that my small, insignificant prayers could mean anything to God in the way God is shaping both my own life and the things that will happen, especially if my prayers were to not necessarily be for my good, and yet God at times would answer in the yes and the positive, because he can work in spite of the things that where he meant something better for me in those moments. There's a balance to this, but it doesn't mean that our prayers aren't go unheard. Our prayers are always answered. It's just many times the answer is no, I have something better. The fourth thing is this. Every event reflects God's continuous action. It is his act alone that gives the laws any events to apply to. The laws are an empty frame. It is he who fills that frame, not now and then on specifically providential occasions, but at every moment. This underscores the Christian doctrine of God's omnipresence and ongoing involvement in creation. Believers can find comfort in knowing that no moment is outside God's active care, from the mundane to the miraculous. And lastly, the fifth one is this. The universe's existence points to a divine mystery. The smallest event, then, if we face the fact that it occurs, leads us back to a mystery which lies outside natural science. It is certainly a possible supposition that behind this mystery, some mighty will in life is at work. For Christians, the very existence of events, unexplained by science alone, science cannot explain events themselves, serves as evidence of God's presence. This invites awe and worship, recognizing that the universe's story is driven by a purposeful divine will. And in that, we can rest in the assurance of it all. Well, that's it. That's it for tonight. It's a short one, but man, it's a fun one. I hope you enjoy this. If you have any questions or thoughts, please feel free. Send me a message. Let me know. Write in the comments where you're coming from and anything that came up or your thoughts about this short little article, The Law of Nature. Until next time, I hope you have a wonderful time. We'll see you then.